All right, free spirits, welcome back to another episode of the Flying Upstream show. Today, we have an exciting guest on with us today. As we talk about entrepreneurship and business, we have a guest who's going to not only teach us a lot, but he's going to share a little bit of his journey with us. And we're going to be able to dig into some really cool things and experiences that he's had along his journey. So today we have Kevin Dooley. He is a six-time founder that developed his love for entrepreneurship in college by launching a hot dog cart business to pay his rent. This experience was a springboard to future adventures that included an entrepreneur corporate role launching new products, a burrito business, and two business to business SaaS companies. When you meet Kevin, you'll quickly notice his dynamic personality, which drives him to inspire creation in others. He has coached and consulted with dozens of founders, business leaders, and student teams. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction.
Of course, of course. Let's begin at the beginning. This is where I like to learn a little bit about you. Tell me about your story. Let's talk about that hot dog cart business in college.
Yeah, so I kind of always had entrepreneur blood in my system. It actually started before the hot dog cart business when I had a paper route that I grew to be like 200 houses, and then I would pay other people to deliver papers on my behalf. So I kind of was always had wheels in motion on how could I take things, turn them around and monetize them or commercialize them and make some money doing it. So I was a typical college kid, struggled a bit to pay my rent and room and board and all those things. Probably spent the money I did have on things that weren't important. But one day, I think it was my junior year, I was late on my rent, which was pretty typical. But my junior year, when I was late on my rent, I went over to my landlord's house, and as I knocked on the door and waited for him to answer and kind of had my whole speech rehearsed on why I needed more time, I kind of looked over on the side of his garage, and there was a hot dog cart sitting there that looked like it needed some TLC, had some weeds growing on it and stuff like that. So as he was coming to the door, I could see him approaching it and stuff. I changed my whole pitch. And when he answered it, I said, "Hey, I stopped by to tell you that my rent was going to be a little bit late, but also to tell you that I wanted to buy that hot dog cart from you. And I want to make a deal on it where if you let me take it now, clean it up, and then get it functioning, I'll not only pay you for the hot dog cart, my rent, I'll pay you a little more just to get it out, just to get it off your hands." And so he was receptive to it. I guess, timing's a big part of everything. And this guy at that time thought it was a funny idea. I don't think he thought I could do it. But I did do it. So I cleaned that up with the help of one of my frat brothers, and we launched Steam and Weenie's hot dog cart. And it was in a Western New York college towns, and it was before people were doing food trucks and all that kind of stuff. And it worked out pretty successfully. So yeah, that was my hot dog cart business start to entrepreneurship.
That is amazing. Since then, you have founded six ventures across very different industries,
Yeah.
from some burritos, some software as a service. What has guided your decisions to keep starting new businesses?
Well, I mean, embedded in my DNA is creativity, right? So I always wanted to try new things, and I saw new things as a challenge. And because maybe I hadn't done a food service business before, I could fully use my own inner creativity to bring it to market, right? Like I'm not following somebody else's plan. I'm not following some academic or some certs that I got, to do it. I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. And so that's always guided me is just wanting to try something different. So when I was in the corporate world, I was there for 10 years and learned a lot and really advanced my skill set. And when I took a severance package to leave, it was during a downsizing, and I wanted to do something completely different. So I went from corporate telecommunications to opening that burrito business that you mentioned. So it was called Red Rock Burrito Company. And I just started from scratch. I had a buddy that had a bar, didn't have a kitchen in it. So I put a kitchen-ish in it, got the necessary permits that I needed to, and started selling burritos out of his back room turned kitchen. It was kind of a funky combination because it was an Irish pub selling burritos. So not what you typically would encounter, but it worked. So got a lot of great experience. And my approach has always been that, to be able to talk firsthand to customers is really the way that you guide any business, right? So what better, way to talk to customers than when you're standing at a counter saying, how can I help you? What can I make for you? So yeah, it was a wild ride. And so each of those stops, the 6 businesses, were always something completely different.
I love that. And you mentioned being able to talk to customers because ultimately, whatever we build, whatever it is that our creativity is kind of pushing us toward, which it sounds like you follow that every single time, that part of you that seeks to create something and to kind of grow into a different version of you, because I think sometimes that's sort of what it takes. You talk about customers and the importance of that, because whatever we build, it is essentially somebody has to buy it, right? Like for it
Yeah.
to
Yep.
make money, somebody has to buy it. What did you learn from the businesses in which at such a young age, right? You kind of put yourself in these positions where in these ventures that you would start, you had to talk to customers. You had to look them in the eye and answer any questions that they have and know that what you're building is directly impacting something in
Yeah.
someone's life. What things did you learn that you still take with you today?
Yeah, you need to know your buyer at a very deep level to be successful. Like when I coach startup founders, they're like, of course I know who my target market is. Of course I know who's going to buy our product. And as I kind of poke at that, they don't really know them well enough. Like it's not good enough to say I'm going to serve the SMB market, right? Like, do you know how big that market is? Right. So like you've got to find a niche within the SMB market to go after, right? Especially when you're first starting out, right? One of my bits of advice is to start niche and then go mass, right? So it's really important to know your buyer at a deep level. That's number one. And number two, it's, to always having a feedback loop so that like when I get that information from a buyer, am I putting it into a table or just kind of filing it in my head? Can I put it into a table so that I can use it down the road? And then when you have an open feedback loop from your customers to whatever your product design team is, even if you're a business of one making burritos, right? Like as people started to tell me that the only thing I don't like about a burrito is like sometimes I take a bite and I get all tomatoes. The next time I get all rice and then I get all protein or meat, right? How about if I blend that together so that I get a little bit of everything with every bite, which is one of the things that I did, which I kind of had the idea, but people were telling me directly, like that would be really cool if you did that. So that business of one, I had the feedback loop to go right back and change my process so that I was incorporating with, feedback that people told me almost real time.
That's amazing. I love that, the feedback loop, because, I've heard a lot of know your customer, like the importance of knowing your customer. But the feedback loop, if you're knowing your customer, but then you're not listening to what they're saying, then, how are you improving? How are you making it better? Um, One of the things that I kind of want to pivot to a little bit is there was a shift for you about 5 years ago. You, who has started many ventures, um, were kind of in a place that you are a completely different place now, like the way that you view it. And I kind of
Yeah.
want you to share that story because I think it's so important and so real to the changes that are happening today, I think, in the business world that a lot of us may not even see today. Can you tell me what happened about 5 years ago and what that shifted for you?
Yeah, it was profound. And if you start to think about 5 years ago, you'd probably come up with a significant event that happened to all of us, and it was the pandemic, right? So what happened to me was I was in an accelerator and I was starting another SaaS company, another software company, and I was going to go through that grind again, right? Building a company from scratch, overseeing the development, oversee the hiring, oversee the launch, all of this stuff that it takes to run a company, right? And I started to do some deep thinking because they physically locked the door, right, of this accelerator in this building when the pandemic hit. Can't go in there anymore. So I did some deep thinking, and I really started to define things. I slowed down a little bit. I tried to simplify things, and I slowed everything down to the point where I started to listen more to my inner voice, right? Like
Mm.
it was an external thing for me. Like, hey, I've already started, 5 companies. Let's go start another one. So it was kind of external stuff, and people were telling me, hey, you've got a brilliant mind in regards to customer success. So the product that I was going to build was a customer success portal that would go over any kind of SaaS products you were already using. And people told me that was a great idea. So I was getting this external voices were telling me, go in this direction. But when I slowed everything down and started to use my inner voices, right? Like, once I became in vibrational alignment to the things that I really want, right? Which is satisfaction and joy, I started to align with, see these other signs and align with them, that what I really want to do is to coach and consult with other founders or founding teams to help them live their dreams, right? And so that's when I made this pivot from rise and grind, which is how I got through everything prior to the pandemic. It was, if it took 10 hours a day, I'd do it. If it took 14 hours a day, I'd do it. If it took 20 hours a day, I'd probably stop there, sleep for 4 hours, get up and do it again. But that was kind of the motto and the mantra of the day in my generation, just rise and grind. So what happened was I started to apply rise and grind to being, the role that I am now. And it didn't work because now it's a creator's world, right? And especially with the advancements in AI and some of the other techs that are out there, right? Like you can do so many things by just being creative, right? Like you don't have to apply time and energy to everything. You can apply creativity to things to get things done in a different way. So my mantra shifted, it was a major shift in mindset from rise and grind to rise and create. So about 5 years ago, I started approaching each day as new, right? Like today is a great day. And I'd launch into, I have a habit stack I do in the morning that kind of gets me in the framework to be creative. And I would launch that in the morning. And then I'd go about, how am I going to create, a new customer today? How am I going to create a great proposal for someone? How am I going to create a new pitch deck for someone? And like whatever it was, I took this creative approach to it, and I didn't define my day the same way every day to kind of day after day, grind after grind. I just kind of blew it up into an empty canvas each day.
That is beautiful. Allowing what the universe has in store for you to come through and create from that place of receiving versus just you following whatever, list we had set up for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, and reacting to external forces, right? Like when you have a startup, right, and you go get funding, then you're driven by external factors, right? Like I have to hit my metrics, I have to hit my goals, I have to stay on pace with my KPIs, I have to have this presentation for my board of directors and see what their reaction is to me. It's all like external stuff. But when you flip that the other way, which is the way it should be, right? Like because what we have inside should reflect the way we see, right? Like we shouldn't look in a mirror and say, oh, that's who I am. And then let that, look inward into our mindset to control our day. Like, hey, I'm having a bad hair day because I'm looking in the mirror, seeing it. And therefore I'm going to have a terrible day today. Like we shouldn't do stuff like that, right? Because it's not the way energy is meant to be, and energy is meant to grow. But when you get in vibrational alignment, when you're in tune with the things that you really want, I've through all my work, like this didn't happen overnight, but it took some practice. And so, I seek satisfaction and joy. So I make sure that the things I do move the needle on satisfaction or joy or both. And I define myself inside out. And what happens is when you're in alignment, and you probably know this, Louisa, like when you're in alignment, you start to see things, right? There are these synchronicities and these things that happen by, like, you don't even know why they happen. They happen by chance, but they actually happen because they're supposed to. Like you're supposed to take advantage of those. So I started thinking that stop thinking I was lucky, and then started to think that, hey, I'm in alignment and I'm seeing the things that were meant for me, and I'm going to take advantage of those things. And then continually reinforcing that I'm going to judge myself, right? Because often we're our own harshest critic, right? I'm going to judge myself by the things that I want internally, right? My inside desires, not what other people expect of me, an investor or, a team of people or whoever that I'm answering to. So I let the inner voice guide me.
That's lovely. And it is probably safe to say, but I'm going to let you say it, that being in alignment and, having those external factors, because they're very real, especially when you get funding. You're a small business and there's other people who are providing some funding or who have a say in the decisions and how things run. Even with that internal shift, though, now when you're vibrationally aligned, um, how does it go in terms of meeting those metrics and getting the outcomes that you need to get to be able to meet the metrics that those external, very real forces require?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so you've got to align your inner desires with, what, like if somebody gives you money and expects a certain return on investment or something like that for it, you've got to align those two things together, of course. But what happens is because you're in alignment and like the flow, like you're not fighting it all every step of the way. You're not taking it as a grind. Like this is work to get to this next milestone. What you're doing is aligning your inner dreams with those external things, but you make sure that you only accept or agree to do something that's in alignment with what you want. So
Yeah.
when you start inside, then you set desired outcomes. They tend to be different than if you start outside setting those desired outcomes. So obviously there'd be a conversation between you and whoever, gave you the investment dollars, and you along the way, you would have articulated to them that these are my desires. These are my dreams of launching this business. These are my goals of it. And so now they've invested in you, right? Because investors invest in people and ideas. So they've invested in you. So it's kind of all structured together. And it just flows, right? It's not a fight every step of the way. And when you're in alignment, you see things pop in front of you, and that tough decision before where you had to make a pivot now sometimes is easier because data may be showing you to make that pivot, and your inner voice is also telling you to take that pivot. Every business you do is always a part data and part intuition, right? Intuition
Mm.
sometimes gets forgotten about, but intuition is real. And when you're in alignment, you can trust it more than if you're not.
I love that. And one of the things that I have experienced after being in this vibrational alignment that, I now live my life in every day, thankfully, is that those opportunities and like the right, for example, as you're talking about it, like the right investors are going to come your way. Like you're just going to get in touch with the opportunities, with the people, with the resources that are going to, even if it doesn't look like it's in alignment right from the beginning, they're going to end up being in alignment with the path that you are meant and that you are walking. So it really is a decision of, I'm going to follow that internal voice. And that internal voice is going to then, once you start following and do all of the mindset work, which I want to circle back to that, that is so important. But then it just starts to happen miraculously. And like, that's part of the things that you mentioned, starting to notice. Um, you start to notice these things in your everyday life and these signs and these paths that you should walk, that perhaps when you're not in alignment, you sort of make those decisions and look at those things from a more of a mental space, a logical space. And for some of us still in that sort of like hustle culture, like, I should have, that makes sense because I should have to work hard to earn it. And I should, all of those ideas. So thank you for sharing that. I wonder, in your coaching today and in your consulting, is that mindset work that you mentioned you had to go through yourself? Is it something that you work with the founders and the leaders that you work with today?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. But I didn't know that I would have to, right? Because I said once I get my stuff right, I can help everybody else. But what I found out, and I end up coaching and consulting with a lot of techies, right? And what happens is that they're really good at, coding and developing, right? They get all the certifications they need. They spend a lot of time coding and developing. They just keep going. And what happens is their mindset kind of gets left behind. So what I'm encountering and I've coached 50 startup founders in the last 5 years, more than that, actually, over 50. And what I'm finding is that their skill sets are far advanced, are far more advanced than their mindset. And that's why they're stuck. So it's not that they can't figure out how to, code and develop and solve a problem for a buyer. It's that their mindset is stuck. Like they don't have clarity of what their desired outcomes are. They don't know where they want to take their business. What do you want this business to be, in the short term and the long term? And because they don't have this free flowing in alignment mindset focused inside out, they end up basically taking, over pivoting. Like they just keep pivoting because they think they're in search of perfection. And really what it is about, being creative and applying yourself. Like there's one of the things I teach people is like plant a flag, right? Like when you're a techie and your mindset's not right, it's all over the place. And you either don't make any decisions because you don't have perfect data or perfect information to make a decision, or you keep making rash decisions. It seems to like alternate back and forth. So yes, so that's what I spend a lot of time is like, okay, so you've advanced this business that to the point that you have an MVP. What do you want out of this business? And it really stumps people. They sit back and they go, what do you mean? What do I want? I want to bring it to market and make some money. I'm like, you're going to have to define it a little more for me, And so it leads to some interesting conversations. And really what happens is we spend some time on mindset first, and then we're able to connect the mindset, the mindset with the skill set. And that's when these founders, they start to get real traction with their business. And then things come more easily because, they're just not stuck in their head on what to do next.
I love that. I love the connect mindset to skill set. That's absolutely beautifully perfect to me because there is that disconnection there that I think a lot of us don't realize when we do think about it a lot in the same way that, we've thought about a lot of things in household culture, which is like, what do you mean? What do I want? I want money and I want this to be successful, but what does that mean? And that mindset and that skill set, yes, it's wonderful that you can do all these things, but how, where's the mental work going to take you? So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. How do you help these founders and these entrepreneurs shift their thinking from hustle to I can have success and I can also have a harmonious life? Like those two things are not extremes. Like they can coexist. How do you help them do that? What does it take?
Yeah, well, I mean, I start with my stories, right? So I've got a lot of stories about how I've overcome this. So, the value that I bring to people is with my experience, insight, mindset, skill set. So, I tell them whole stories that you need, tell them stories that you need all of these things. And then I tell them about the shift and how it happened to me. And there's other people that have done it this way as well. And then I start to tell them, I mean, it depends on who it is, right? Like it's never one size fits all. But if it's a techie founder, I start to go, I start naming sources for them, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, who has a very scientific approach to vibrational alignment, and so he resonates with a lot of these founders. The thing about founders is, for the most part, they're curious, right? And they want to learn. So if you give them something new to learn that they can then couple with, the mad skills they have in coding, they're interested, right? They understand quickly that could be pretty powerful. So what I'll do is I'll tell them what I do, and I'll tell them the sources I use to do what I do. And they include things like Dr. Joe Dispenza, Abraham Hicks, James Clear's habit stacking. There's one of the things that I do is I build systems, right? So I mentioned earlier my morning system. I call it my wake stack. So, there's some things that you do in the morning that you do every morning. So why not build them into a routine so that you get some momentum without using a lot of your brain power, right? If I'm going to take this day and make it as creative as possible, I want to kind of preserve my brain power for later in the day when I really get into that. So I've got a morning stack that includes things like, hydrating with electrolytes and salt, some healthy stuff. Then I get my cup of coffee, but always hydration first, and then coffee. And then I listen to Abraham Hicks. Today is a good day, which is affirmation. That today's a brand new day to be creative. And I have my spin on it. I do yoga. I walk in morning sun. Just for the benefits of morning sunshine and vitamin D and all those things. And I do all those things without thinking about them now, because when I shifted 5 years ago, I started to put some healthy habits in place to support this shift, right? So I wouldn't fall back to my old way. So I go through all this stuff with them, and usually I'm a good salesperson, right? And my pitch is like powerful and resonates with them, and they go, all right, I'm going to try some of these things. And so I'm like, please do. Let's craft it up for you. And the reason we're doing all this is so that you can get clarity on what you really want, with your business. And clarity is quieting the mind, right? And so can you get quiet inside your mind to figure out what you really want and get away from the grind? And, I'm about to code for 20 hours today to advance my product, so let's slow things down for a little bit so that we can speed them up later, or they can move faster later. So that's how it typically comes together. It comes together with a story, a pitch, and then a sketch on what they could do, based on the things that they like. If they like to run, they like to do yoga. If they go to the gym every day at 5:30 a.m., let's work with some of the blocks that they already have and insert some stuff around them that get them mentally prepared to really crush the day.
I love that. I am, true to, of course, what we have in common, which is, the alignment of vibrational energy and just living and flowing, instead of like that rise and grind culture. I
Mm-hmm.
am a big believer in morning rituals too. Like I have a morning ritual as well. And it includes meditation, and it includes journaling, and it includes affirmation. So I love some of the things that you mentioned. The power of that, I think that it can't be put into words. I think it has to be experienced.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. How do you feel during it, right? Like a lot of people talk, so KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. So one, and companies are very focused on those. What I tell my founder clients is that this KPI is a key personal indicator, right? So follow things that make you feel good, right? Like as simple as that sounds, right? Like that's my pursuit of this whole satisfaction and joy. I think those are the two biggest things we can achieve, in our life, is to be satisfied with our portfolio of work, and have joy, to just be happy about that along the way, and find things that give us joy. So this key personal indicator is really about how do you feel, and so like when I go through my wake stack, my set of morning habits, I feel so good, when I finish it up. If I, commit to each step in it, I'm like, wow, I feel great. And you're just ready to go, ready to create.
Yeah.
And how about you? How do you feel when you go through that? Isn't it amazing?
I feel empowered, if I had to put in one
Yes.
word, because it's like I'm taking control of my day. I'm not letting the day be defined for me by any external circumstances.
Right.
I am defining what my day is going to look like for the rest of it. And by doing that first thing of having that morning routine, my meditation, my affirmations, my journaling, I feel like every single day it is me who gets to decide what that day looks like, regardless of what's thrown at me. It doesn't mean that life doesn't throw all the things, it does every single
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
feel empowered and in control to like keep moving forward.
100%. We're not living in bubbles, right? Like,
Yes.
when I made the shift to this mindset, I was very anti woo woo, like back in the day, rise and grind, hockey player, but sport I played in high school and college was ice hockey. And so I was always rise and grind, and this woo woo stuff, like I was aware of it out there. And I knew people that, embraced it. And I was like, that'll never work for me. But again, when you quiet your mind and you become open-minded, right, and you're willing to accept new ways to do new things, then you start to embrace it. So I wish I had done it sooner. It would be been interesting to see, how much impact I could have had, if I had started sooner. But I feel again, when I pivoted to coaching other founders, the reason I did it was to scale my impact, right? Like I
Mhm.
could, if I started my own company, I could impact one company of many people. But with what I do now, I'm impacting, one person at many companies who turn, to their employees or their teams and teach them what I taught them. And it's a real, teach people to fish kind of vision that I have. So like I teach you the whys behind, like I have two main buckets. So the first bucket of founders is ones that still have the idea in their head, maybe on paper a little bit, but they haven't launched anything. So with them, a lot of it is mindset. How do we take your dream and build it into a business that is viable, basically, that people will see value in? So that's one bucket. Another bucket is ones that have already advanced through that, right? Because a lot of tech founders, they just keep building. And then they're like, let's put an MVP out there. Let's put something out for people to use. They get some feedback. It's unstructured. And now they say, okay, what do I do next? And so like those people are stuck, and they may even have revenue. They may have gotten people to buy it, but they don't really have a plan going forward. And so with them, it's more about what are your desired outcomes of this business that you prove that you can have a few customers. What do you want from it? Right. And a lot of people talk about GTM plans or roadmaps or playbooks. You can only build one of those if you know what the desired outcomes are, because what you do is
Mhm.
you get clarity of mind of what your desired outcomes are. Then you reverse engineer it back to what it's going to take to get there. Right. So now my playbook or my GTM or my roadmap is a set of strategies, tactics, and systems designed to get me to a specific desired outcome that I've identified, hopefully from the inside out.
I love that. That is so beautifully said because I find that it can be really difficult to explain when you live in alignment and when you live in vibrational flow how things can still work. So I love that what you do creates systems because there is no guessing, right? You
Mhm.
after you do the mindset work with them and establish all of those things, then it's about creating systems and doing that in flow is absolutely beautiful and perfect. And as we're beginning to wrap up this amazing conversation that we're having, Kevin, I want to ask you if you could go back to your college self, what is one piece of advice that you would give the version of you that started that hot dog cart to be able to move forward and pursue their dreams and become the version of themselves that they're meant to be?
Yeah, it's really tough to pick one when you've had so many experiences. Can I give you a couple, but do them quickly?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
it's to simplify. So like I would overcomplicate things, right? Like I would spend a lot of time building business cases, business plans, all of that. Now we use a business model canvas, right? Which is one sheet. But I would have this much in a business plan, and I like slide it over to a banker to say, okay, believe in me, give me some money so I can launch this. And it was like total overcomplicating things, because really what you need to do is to give something to a buyer to use, potential buyer to use, right? Get their feedback and iterate on it and just keep doing that. So number one, simplify. Number two is plant flags. I said that earlier. That seems to be a problem with a lot of people I talk to. Like, yeah, we don't have perfect information. Being an entrepreneur is always about making assumptions. You have a hypothesis about how you think this business is going to go. Let's go with that, because most people start businesses in markets that they know something about. So let's use what you know about this, plant a flag, and then see what happens. And that's when the feedback loop comes into play, right? So if we plant a flag and we have a feedback loop open, then we can know pretty quickly whether it's working. So we can go all in, right? Like and push all the chips in on it, or we can pivot away from it and try something else. So that's number two. And then the other thing we just covered as well, and that's build systems. Because if you read the Ray Dalio book, Principles, a big theme of that one is that things that you do in life repeat themselves over time, right? So, I've been in business for 40 years. So, things are starting to repeat themselves over and over again. So if I have a system on how I made a decision in regards to this situation that happened, then and I keep that as a system, then I just pull it out and apply it the next time that situation comes up. And I revise things as I go because time changes things, new information changes things, but I don't freak out about it, right? Like one of the big problems is burnout, right? And developing your resiliency, your ability to bounce back from stress. So systems help with that because they kind of calm you. That you're just like, I'm going to implement the system, see what happens. I'm not going to stress out about this. My system, and the same thing. That's why system is a habit stack or the wake stack in the morning. Applying my system first thing, because systems are repeatable actions that lead to growth, right? Like the key to growing or scaling a company is putting repeatable systems in place. The key to growing yourself, your personal, yourself as a person is putting repeatable processes in place so that you have less stress and you're a bit, you can bounce back and be more resilient to stress situations. So, yeah. So 3 things: simplify, plant flags, and then build systems.
I love that. I love those. I really love those. And I'm sure that your college, the college version of yourself would have been really grateful for those as well. And Kevin, I just posted your Instagram in our chat, but if somebody did want to work with you, where could they find you? Where can they go learn more from you? Because I feel like you have so much knowledge, especially in this area of coaching entrepreneurs and founders. Where can the audience find you?
Yeah, definitely on Instagram. So it's Dooley_biz.coach. And I'm pretty active on there, a couple 2 or 3 times a week. About the same, maybe a little more active on LinkedIn. And it's, the LinkedIn URL / Dooley KM. So DOOLEYK, Kevin, M. Michael. So Dooley KM. And then my Gmail, dooley.km@gmail.com.
Dooley.km, km@gmail.com. Wonderful. So we will have all of those linked in the description and the show notes. Kevin, it has been a pleasure having you here. I'm also excited to work with you. Something else that's exciting for listeners and viewers. We're going to have Kevin in another part of our Flying Upstream little show here, and we'll keep you updated on that. That is a wrap for today with this beautiful conversation. Kevin, thank you for being on today.
Thanks for having me. So great to talk to you.
Of course, likewise. And if this journey inspired you to rethink your approach to business and success, you're not alone. Remember, it's not just about the grind. It's about alignment, intention, and creating with purpose. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. As always, keep questioning.